head, but I do know that for my first audition, I didn't even try the voice, really.
Wow.
As far as I remember, I just sort of talked a little higher pitch than I normally do. And when I had to do the laugh, I just giggled. Which, you know, had its pros and cons. The pro being I was really invested in the scene, and the con being that I had to come back and try the voice in my second audition.
And were you terrified of doing that?
Terrified. But I had the benefit of having grown up with SpongeBob. You know, it came out when I was a kid, and I'd been watching it forever. So I just had to do my research and rewatch episodes. Yeah, and then it was just a blast.
Yes, Wesley.
I was gonna say, I auditioned for this show a couple years ago. Did not get the part.
Can't let it go. You can't let it go.
What'd you say?
Hold that grudge.
Can't let it go. No. Tina. Anyway, and then I was living in Los Angeles actually after they did the Chicago tryout, and I got the call that I was going to be flying in to do a reading before the Broadway. No guarantees, but it was sort of like my audition, like a 3-day reading with the entire cast who already had their offers. No pressure. And but anyway, I drilled the voice of Doug Lawrence, Mr. Lawrence, the voice actor for Plankton, because I thought everyone was going to be doing like pitch perfect impersonations. And I just drilled it for weeks, and then I got to the reading, and Tina was like, "What are you doing? We're not doing impressions." And so I had to sort of pay homage to the cartoon, and yet bring more of myself to the voice.
Yeah, I have to say I loved that in my first audition, Tina was like, "Oh, you don't have to do a carbon copy of Squidward.
That's great.
We just want an essence of it," which is great because, and then any of us are impressionists. We're actors, so it was great that we didn't have to just be the cartoon.
But yet the show still, and all of your characters, has essences of the cartoon. It feels familiar in that way. What was the rehearsal process like of kind of getting through this? Because there's so many things you guys are doing, I can't imagine how you even rehearsed it.
It was completely inventive. I mean, the room was just like a playground. As an actor, it's like the best part of this entire process was showing up on day one, especially when it was a movement workshop back, I guess 6 years ago. It was just like, you got to go in there and just create, and with a group of an ensemble of people, that's like the best thing you can hear on day one.
And like, I think one of the things that exemplified that was we walked into the room, the studio, and it was filled with like pool noodles and beach balls and weird ladders and hula hoops. Yeah, just like all of these toys. And one of the first things that we have done every step of the way is Tina was like, okay, like what would you do with these things? Like, just play. Something, come up with something good, and then everybody would come up with ideas and invent things. So
it was like 1, 2, 3, go, and that was pretty much
stuff to like the DIY aesthetic. It was awesome.
And the thing about Tina is she always says nothing will be wrong. Nothing is stupid. Well, some things might be stupid in a really great way. There's a lot of things in the show that are stupid, but she just was so good at saying, try it. It's not going to be wrong. And sometimes she'd be like, yeah, maybe not. But in general, it's like, I like that idea, let's take that bit of that idea and it got put in the show.
Now, Brian, Ethan, and Danny, this is your Broadway debut.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Did you turn to advice from the veterans in the cast?
Ones with glasses.
The ones with glasses, the smarter ones.
I wish they'd given us advice about that. Bring glasses.
Always wear glasses.
We're talking about the craft today. Glasses.
Yeah, I feel like we definitely they're constant sources of advice. Even
I was just gonna say, I make an entrance right after Gavin's 11 o'clock showstopper, Loser. And come on. He stops the show cold. I mean, he just like, sometimes they like standing ovation in the middle of Act 2 because of his number. But
Like
meanwhile,
once.
I'm in the pit waiting to make an entrance for the next scene, and I'm like down there waiting for like 5 minutes of an eruption of applause, and I'm like, get over it. He's not that good.
Put him right in his place. did I read that you understudy Patrick as well?
Yes.
So what was that experience of rehearsing, creating your own character, but also being like, I'm ready to step in for this dude if he goes down?
Wait.
You're like a cold.
Wait. You're ready?
You're up 2 o'clock, you're on.
No. It was definitely part of the audition process. Being, I think, one of the last additions to this group, I was being seen for Crabs and as well as the cover. So I was already sort of in prep mode before we started work. But then I just, put Patrick aside for, the weeks that it took for us to get to previews and then started really digging into Patrick as well. And it's been a real treat. I mean, because they're, on some level, they're completely opposite. Whereas one is so calculated and just knows exactly what he wants from life. And then the other one is just living that life. And to me, that's, you can't ask for more as an actor to get to go from one extreme to the next like that.
And I enjoy in the wings every night during Sea Star Saviour. If you've seen the show, the bit where Danny does the tambourine, he's in the wings doing it with his giant boxing gloves on.
Oh my gosh!
Like, because he has to keep rehearsing, so he's like with his giant boxing gloves on.
Now, Ethan, you do something in the show that is unbelievable to me. Without spoiling anything, you do this amazing number towards the end where you're essentially climbing through ladders that, like, it's so unbelievable. And singing live, the only other person who could do this is Pink. And like, if they replace you, it just needs to be Pink. Because I'm pretty sure that no one can do what you do. What was the experience of rehearsing that? Like, how did you rehearse that?
Ooh, oh yeah, GDS wrestling. Yeah, I was a wrestler in high school, and that's how I prepared for it. I mean, I was one of the. Here's how it happened. We were in tech, and I hadn't actually ever seen the ladder wall before, and they flew it in. And they were like, "Okay, cool. You've got like half an hour. What do you want to do?"
And if we'd come to the seasoned pro, I would have said.
And just waving through a window.
And then the next day it was Neil Patrick Harris. So I'm just like, forlorn. Just like, is anybody else seeing? It was, yeah, so that's, those are my two.
I don't like knowing when critics are there or, during previews, reviews and stuff. But I accidentally looked dead straight in Ben Brantley's face. The New York Times, the chief critic. And
that's the correct response.
Yeah, exactly. You guys know. It's such a recognizable face that it scared the shit out of me.
That would do it.
Called, and this was, believe it or not, 10 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. It's
2008?
It's taken quite a long time. My agent called and said, Nickelodeon wants to know if you're interested in coming in and pitching ideas for a SpongeBob musical. And before he could finish the sentence, I said, no.
No.
I mean, really, because all I could imagine were, big costume characters from arena shows with, the big foam prosthetics. And he said, hold on. Steve Hillenburg, who's the creator of the show, he isn't so wild about doing a Broadway musical, and if there is one, he wants to do it with what he called an indie spirit. Ooh. And my agent Patrick said, so really just approach this as you would approach it. What would you love to see and do? And once that permission was given, I just started imagining. And I kind of thought I have nothing to lose because I know what I don't want it to be. So I might as well just go for it and do what would interest me. And if they don't want to do it, they don't want to do it. But, I fell more and more in love with it.
What about you, Tom?
Well, when I was pitched to come in and talk about the musical, Tina was already attached, so for me, that was already a reason to come into the room. But I also was given the musical concept that it was going to be a number of iconic rock and pop songwriters who were going to be creating the score. And coming off of my American Idiot experience, which was so which was just such a beautiful and gratifying experience, I thought, well, imagine being in a room with 15 Green Days.
Right, yeah.
And so I was really intrigued by it, and from the moment I walked in the room and heard the ideas about what this is going to be to right now, it's just been such a blessed thing in my life.
But just saying, is there like one that...
You know, there's so many moments when I'm watching and hearing the cast. I was just on stage talking about it. I have those same things, but you can't help but sit there and watch I'm Not a Loser and how that was built from the initial demo that They Might Be Giants gave us, to then being in the room with Tina and Chris Catelli, who I can't say enough about Chris's work in the show. And basically Chris and I just kept saying, and then we, and what if we did this? And even to those nots at the end, the not, where Chris was like, I think we just need one more thing. And I was like, okay, what about this? So watching how that all came together and then hearing the response to it is quite a moment to have.
You know, the other thing you guys should know is that, yes, all these songs came in, but, for instance, I heard you talking before about the ladder sequence at the end, when Ethan is climbing and he's singing over and over, I'm Not a Simple Sponge. That was based on what Brendan Urie wrote in Not a Simple Sponge, but that orchestration and vocal arrangement and all that is Tom Kitt composition.
Tom Kitt, you got it.
Frank Capra-esque story about a person who is, Kevin Kline plays both the president, who is kind of unpopular and seems to just be operating from a place of anger and only for himself, and then Dave, who runs a temp agency, and this wonderful heart on the sleeve, loving person, and through circumstances, Dave ends up standing in for the president and having to take over, and then the presidency becomes this very popular one. So it's a movie that I had watched many times and just always said to myself, I really think this story sings. And I happened to be at a meeting and with Warner Brothers Theatricals and said that out loud, and the next thing I knew I was working on it. And I just think it's a beautiful story. I think it's a very timely story. We're going to get to be in Washington, D.C., so it's going to be wonderful to do a political musical in Washington, D.C. at this time. And I actually, one day in rehearsal, I just went up to Tina, I said, can I talk to you about something else? And I pitched her Dave, and I'm so grateful that she's on board, because she's bringing the same magic and ingenuity and creativity that she brings to SpongeBob, and I just feel so grateful to be in the room with her.
So it's set underwater. No. It's set underwater. No. But that's amazing. I'm so excited to see it. Will you remind me when again it premieres so that everybody here can come get tickets?
I think it starts performances in early July. It's also our dear friend who we lost this year, Tom Meehan, is the co-book writer with Nell Benjamin, who's also writing lyrics. And it's just really, we had a reading actually last week that we're still flying high from. And, oh yeah, yesterday we had a reading. So, so I think it starts at arena stage performing, which is going to be great for me because I was there with Next to Normal, but we were actually in an alternate space. They were building the current space that we're going to, so it's my first time actually in their actual space.
That'll be a great full circle moment, I'm sure. So, coming back to